Workers have been on strike resisting attacks on their livelihoods by Clover bosses in a bid to maximize profit and in the process intensifying the exploitation of workers. The bosses of Clover have planned to introduce reforms to restructure the company at the expense of jobs. The restructuring by Clover management includes 1. Closure of several factories, B. Retrenchment of workers, C. 20% in wage cut, D. Introducing one van assistant and compression of a working week, including work on holidays and Sundays. The factory closures and retrenchment. Clover closed 2 factories in Western Cape, Paro and Millerton in 2020. Right. In its current plan, which is supposed to take effect from March 2022, Clover has planned to close further 4 factories in Glenford, Milburn in Free State, Lichtenburg in Northwest, and City Deep in Gauteng. The inevitable outcome of these factories' closures is loss of jobs. In 2021 alone, Clover retrenched more than 1,600 workers. It is planning to retrench further 812 by the end of February 2022. This is despite the fact that in the authorization of the acquisition of Clover shares, the acquiring company, Milco, has promised not to retrench workers. The closure of factories is not only leading to lost jobs at Clover alone, but is also destroying jobs along the supply chain, as well as destroying the economies of the small towns in which factories are to be closed. The South African Broadcasting Corporation preliminary investigation that looked at the effects of the closure of Lichtenburg factory in the Northwest Province found that upstream the supply chain, a number of dairy farmers are being displaced and closing. This is also affecting dairy farmers in the Midlands parts of the country who were suppliers of milk to Clover factories. Dairy farmers have informed us that they are scaling down jobs because of this loss of business. We can speculate with strong conviction that jobs are also going to be destroyed downstream of the supply chain. That is in the logistics involving transportation of milk, the farms to the factories, and transportation of finished goods from factories to retail. It is on the other hand destroying the economies of these towns because it displaces their huge market, the workers. In a capitalist economy, workers are also a market for goods produced in different industries, and by retrenching them, it means they lose money, which enables them to buy consumer goods in retail and wholesale. So our argument that closure of factories in Heilbronn, Frankfurt, Paro, Millerton, and Lichtenburg are destroying the economies of this town is not far-fetched from deduced from the political economy of capitalism. In addition, the factory closures causes a social rupture in the families of these workers employed at these factories in these small towns. Considering that a worker is a social being belonging to a social network of communities, those fortunate workers not affected by retrenchment, but rather required to relocate with factories, will have an interruption to their family lives. Their children are already at school in those towns, and maybe their partners are already working in the same vicinity. The relocation will interrupt this either by increasing cost of living for the families of these workers, as the worker will have to pay for shelter and clothing in addition to cost of the main household, or by partners quitting their jobs to relocate with their partners and thus losing income. Wage cuts and one van assistance compromised compressed working week. Clover management has proposed wage cut of more than 20%. This, in reality, is a reintroduction of apartheid wage structure premised on the exploitation of cheap black labor. Management claims that wages of workers are above the average market rate, and thus bosses are determined not to only suppress these wages but propose to cut them. Underpinning this logic is capitalism's iron law. Reduce input and labor cost in order to maximize profit. By closing and relocating factories and retrenching, fewer workers will remain in this dairy corporation, will be overworked and extremely exploited. To give a deeper practical effect to intensify exploitation following this retrenchment, Clover is planning to compress a working week to introduce 12-hour shift, reducing assistance handling to a delivery van to one, introducing a permanent short time, and introducing working on Sundays and public holidays to be compulsory for new workers. These new ways of operation planned for Clover are tailored to ensure that even with the reduction of laborers, the company is still able to produce at or above average level of labor time so that they can be in a better position to bargain for collusion in this monopoly-infested industry, or at least be competitive to few oligopolies that dominates this industry. The question we ask is, if those closing factory at Clover in these townships do not pay regard to the devastating economic impact on these economies of these towns, what are their real motives? Though it is not clear at this stage, it is possible to use general understanding of the motion of capitalist economy to speculate. The general feature of imperialist capitalism is its tendency to exploit capital, but also to enter the parts of the international market to dump goods it has produced at cheaper labor cost in other parts of the world. Milco, as a multi-consortium, is in the process of destroying jobs, factories, and suppliers in this country, and moving its production to the coastal areas. It is predictably looking to bring its own suppliers to manufacturing, but also dumping finished cheap dairy products branded under Clover. This is the most conceivable and predictable logic of its behavior at the current moment.
The Central Bottling Company, that is CBC, is a company that is the majority shareholder in Milco and is an Israeli company. We are not opposed to CPC only on the basis of its destruction of jobs, wage cuts, and local economies of small towns, but as internationalists, guided by the principles of international working class solidarity, we are opposed to CPC because it is part of the Israeli Zionist imperialism. The company is operating in occupied Palestinian territories, and as such, it perpetuates the continued oppression, dispossession, exploitation, and brutal oppression of the Palestinian people. The total sum of the economic and political implications of this company has left us without choice but to call for disinvestment of Milco from Clover. By allowing Milco to acquire shares in the oldest dairy factory in this country, that is Clover, the African National Congress demonstrated its hypocrisy in support of the boycott, disinvestment, and sanctions movement against Israel apartheid in support of the Palestinian people. Its speeches during Palestinian Solidarity Week that takes place annually amounts to nothing. Moreover, they have demonstrated a lack of care for the people, despite promising to create a better life for all 20 years into liberal democracy. This merger has destroyed production, jobs, and condemned the remainder of the Clover workers in the factory to slave working conditions. Government's commitment to divest from production, as illustrated in the privatization of state-owned enterprises and leaning to attract foreign direct investment, has aided process of monopoly domination by multinational corporations that destroy local factories and jobs. That is why the government is dragging its feet in declaring that Milco is in breach of the conditions that are contained in the authorization of the merger, which precludes the employer from retrenching workers or introducing less favorable conditions of employment, and 2, proceed to expel it in conjunction with the demand by workers for disinvestment of Milco. Because of the hesitancy of the government to intervene, despite Kiusa writing to them at the beginning of December 2021, and the continued disrespect of the labor laws of this country, Milco Clover has demonstrated in the latest development by their refusal to uphold the Sesame instruction to pay the 13th check of workers. Clover workers, their trade unions, and the progressive forces have planned to intensify the strike. In December, the company gave 1,000 Rand incentive to those workers who are not on strike. This illustrates a complete disdain to the laws of this country. Further, they are punishing the striking workers for going on strike by not paying them their full 13th check. Our program of action is as follows. A, there are 3 strategic unions who we have prioritized for a meeting, that is NUMSA, Sakau, and Thorn. A meeting with these unions is going to take place no later than Tuesday, the 18th of January. B, a special working class movement meeting is being convened on Wednesday, the 19th of January, through a webinar to look at solidarity action and to elaborate a further program of action. Here we are calling all the movements that are part of the Working Class Summit, as well as other organizations that have come on board. C, plan for the occupation of plants Clover wishes to close, that is Lichtenburg, Frankfurt, Heilbronn, must be laid down after meeting with the community organizations in those towns and member organizations of the Working Class Summit. We have already approached the northwest region of SAFTU and other organizations to, together with us, convene a meeting in the northwest to discuss the issue of Lichtenburg. D, a national and international day of action shall be convened on the 25th of January. We have already been in touch with organizations and people in America to coordinate this international day on the 25th of January. On this day, the working class is called to mobilize for occupation of Clover, protest in shopping malls, still stocking products, and target the Israeli institutions such as embassies and companies, and hopefully also the South African embassies in those particular countries. Thank you very much.
May I ask Noah to make an additional statement before we take questions?
Sure. So on behalf of...
Sorry, Noah.
Thank you. So on behalf of PSA and the BDS Coalition, we'd just like to say that we support all of the workers' demands, and we must reiterate that there must be disinvestment of Clover. Sorry? Oh, sorry. That there must be a disinvestment of Clover and Milco, not just of the Milco consortium, not just from Clover, but also from all of the other businesses within South Africa. It doesn't make sense that a post-apartheid state would engage in businesses with a current apartheid state. You know, the ANC government has continually spoken about their support for the Palestinian people, but there's a disparity between their words and their actions. So we want concrete action from the ANC government to not just stop businesses with Israeli-owned companies who not just operate from the occupied territories, but who are operating within South Africa, but to also sanction South African businesses that are currently trading with these companies.
Thank you very much. We're now in your hands. Come and facilitate.
Let me facilitate the questions. We'll take questions. We are broadcasting live on Facebook, so we'll request Correct here to assist us if we can be able to read some of the questions posted on the comment section of our live stream. But let me start in-house. Those who want to pose questions to any of the leaders who are in front here.
Okay, there you have it, a live briefing there by trade unions in the Clover strike, and they are articulating their plans and the way going forward, and now they are taking questions, of course, from the floor, from the media.